Hello, friends, and welcome to this episode of Superhero Ethics. Today, myself and comic book expert extraordinaire Will Freeland are here to talk to you about Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, the second of the Miles Morales' movies. We're going to try hard to find the ethical questions we want to discuss. It might mostly be a podcast of the two of us incoherently screaming about how amazing this movie was, and maybe the ethical question is just, why don't all movies, are this good? We'll see. We'll find some good ethical questions. We're going to talk about all the things about the movie. We're going to talk about the comic book connections in the movie. We're going to ask some good questions. All that and more after a commercial break that if it's from the Roxxon Corporation, turn off the podcast now. Welcome back. This is Matthew, your host. If you were confused a bit by that mention of the Roxxon Corporation, which I don't think appears anywhere in this movie, well, the thing is, I was so blown away by this movie. I came home, I watched some videos about it, and then I was like, I need more Miles Morales in my life. So I downloaded the Miles Morales video game and started playing it, and that's why Roxxon is on my mind. But it is just... Let's talk about it, Will, because this was one hell of a movie.
That's amazing. Did you play the Spider-Man PS4 game, the 2018
I
one?
played the PS4 game. We kept thinking we wanted to play the fifth one, the new one, the Miles Morales one, and we got it on PS4, but then we're like, do we really want to play it on the PS4? It's probably going to kill our system. Should we just wait to play it on the PS5? We finally got the PS5, mostly to play the Star Wars Jedi game, which stopped once the Zelda game came out. But then last night I was like, no, I'm sorry. We got to download this. So, yeah. Not quite as hip a Miles Morales as in the movie, but, still a good way to get a little more Miles in your life. But, yeah, so... First, Will, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit? Because I think you are an MCU comic guy, and if I remember, Spidey is really your guy. So
Spider-Man is my favorite.
For those who haven't heard you before, talk a little about yourself.
Hi, so Will Freeland, on the internet, primarily known as Silver Dreamer. You can find me on Twitter or Twitch or Instagram. I also have a TikTok that I post zero comic stuff about, but it exists. And I also have a podcast of my own called Hype is My Superpower. It's me and my best buddy Steve. We talk about comics ad nauseum. Sorry, my dog's here. But we talk about all the comics that we read. I read all of the current 616 universe, and Steve reads all of the comics that have mutants in them. It's a lot of fun.
Nice. So, all right, so you went into this movie. I know you'd enjoyed the first, you enjoyed the video game. Overall, what do you think of this movie?
Amazing. It's so good. So the last 3 Spider-Man movies that have come out, Into the Spider-Verse, No Way Home, and then Across the Spider-Verse, all have become my new favorite Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
Just it so impressed. Like they were able to connect it plot wise with Into the Spider-Verse, but then still create their own unique story and introduce more spiders from across the entire web of life and destiny, and just it was so fun. There's a couple of like holes in the plot that I was like, okay, but how does this technically work? And so like I'm really chomping at the bit to get beyond the Spider-Verse to figure out, are they going to resolve that, or are they going to leave it be? What are they going to do?
So, huge spoiler warning. We're going to spoil everything in this movie. If you haven't seen it yet, I don't know what you're doing with your life. If you don't want to go to the theater, I get that. I really hope it's going to be available online as soon as possible, but it is so good. Definitely worth seeing. I have to tell you a couple times as we were getting towards the end of the movie, I started to have this weird thought of, is this going to end with a to be continued kind of a thing? Because the movie had gone very long, and then like all of a sudden, it really started when we realized he was in the wrong world, and we were like, oh, okay, wait, this is a different Miles Morales. And I was really thinking, like, is this going to be a to be continued situation? I think it might be. Because I didn't think, like, we now needed another half hour for the movie. And then Gwen shows up outside Peter B. Parker's house. and you start to do the pan out, and I was like, are you going to do it? Are you going to do it? And I just needed to see like a couple of like pixels that were black and white. And I was like, yes, it's Spider-Man. And I was like, that point I knew, like, we're getting a whole new to be continued. And I was just so, it made me so happy to know that they'd planned this all, that the 2 and 3 were fitting together.
Yeah, I remember it was not too long after they announced this movie. They're like, yeah, it's going to be a 2-parter. And I was like, oh, well, okay. And then the name got dropped and it was, Across the Spider-Verse, and it didn't say part 1. And I was like, did they go back on that, or like what's going on here? And they basically pulled a Infinity War Endgame on us.
Yeah.
And I'm here for it. Cuz like it's so much fun, cuz you see this in comic books a lot, where they so I read trade paperbacks, so like it's like 5 and 6 issues at once in one like book, and there'll be this like behind the scenes plot. The big bad is building up as we watch the hero go through their like their mini plot, their current thing. And so when you get to the end, it always ends with this cliffhanger of like, hey, but the big guy's still going. And they did that, and like Across the Spider-Verse was one TP of the Miles Morales story, and it's just and I'm so ready. give me the resolution. I want to know.
I have to say, and again, for those who enjoy things in a different way than I do, that is totally fine. I'm just talking about my own experience. I think this movie, more than anything else, has made me feel so vindicated in my no trailers, no information, because I went into this knowing nothing. I knew that Gwen was going to be in it, and I knew that they were going to play up the possibility of the romance. That was it. And so, like, India Spider-Man and that whole bit of like awesome representation and just awesome amazingness. The British punk Spider-Man, Miguel, all the crazy spider people, and the fact that it was going to be 2 movies, I had no idea about. And it was like every 5 minutes there was something new that I was like, okay, well, this is now what the movie is. And then they did something else new that I just had never expected and was totally blown away by.
Yeah, I wish I could live that life. It's just there's so many movies that I go and watch that I end up seeing, like in the same genre type, that I end up seeing trailers for it and stuff. Like I went and saw Fast X like 3 weeks ago, and it had a trailer for Across the Spider-Verse. Like, damn it. Oh well.
I just kind of hang out in the back of the theater and like walk to my seat when they start doing the like, you should go buy popcorn thing, just to skip the trailers entirely. So let me just jump in with a question though, because I think one of the main things I want to talk about is like what of this is from comics and how does it connect. But also,
are we officially spoilers? Like, I don't want to like.
No. I've dropped the spoiler warnings.
Okay.
Everything
cool.
here is spoilers forward. We can spoil whatever we want.
Sure.
So here's one of my biggest questions for you, again, as someone who knows the comics really well, but also just knows how all these things work. There was a little bit of this in the first movie, but especially in this, it felt very clear that they are establishing that the universes that they are going to, like the MCU universe, it is all part of the same multiverse. And we saw some Sony stuff. We definitely saw like, a Tobey Maguire Spider-Man and Anthony Garfield Spider-Man, but then especially the Donald Glover character, because we saw him as a live action Aaron Davis in the Far From Home, where he mentioned that he had a nephew. And then here we saw him as a live action Prowler, which, just the fact that they were able to blend live action with animation, like.
Thank you, Mary Poppins.
Mary Poppins.
Thank you, Roger Rabbit.
And Roger Rabbit ran so that this could fly. I mean, I remember watching the first Miles and being like, why isn't this part of the MCU? Like, in some ways I'm glad, because the MCU's getting so big and overbloated. But here's my point. When I got to the end and it said to be continued, and then I knew we were going to get Miles Morales will return in, I wondered if they were going to say some MCU product. Like,
Ooh.
because here's my question: now that we've established in the MCU that we're very much in multiverse land, do you think we're gonna get any of the Miles Morales universe stuff happening in anything MCU puts on screen?
So I I'll say I wouldn't be surprised if we do.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, second of all, um, I don't want it to. I guess if we do, the way I would do it would be if it's in Beyond and it's like a 2 to 3 minute scene of
Yeah.
animated Miles in a live action MCU
Yeah.
New York or something. Because that's one thing that they've been really amazing about is keeping the animation style of the character for the universe that they're from and inserting it
So good.
into that universe that they're telling the story part in, and it looks so freaking good. And so having an animated Miles, and it's did you notice like Donald Glover's character was like sitting down and he was the same size as Miles.
Yeah.
So like Miles is going to be tiny if he shows up in MCU, in the physical MCU. So who knows? But I guess I don't know what's next.
I mean, another live action connection that I hadn't realized because this is an MCU, this is Sonyverse still, but that scene in the Chinese the like bodega with the little grocery store, the Chinese woman
from Venom
the counter. Yeah, I didn't know that was from Venom until I read it online later. So that's another
well,
amazing connection.
I need to see that again because they officially established what Earth that is. In that scene, it was like Earth like 533 or something like that, and I need to watch it again so I can ingrain that into my mind. That was another thing is they used the same Earth numbering system from the comics in this movie.
Now
and
let's
that
talk
is
further
awesome.
about that because I thought that you had said at one point that you were kind of annoyed that they'd established that MCU is 616, which is also the comic book universe.
Right.
But here they said that the MCU, I think they said it was like 99.
199999.
Yeah. So what's that about?
That's the Earth that got established 10 years ago. It got labeled, the MCU universe got labeled as 199999. Just I don't know why, because it's not like the MCU started in 1999 or anything like that. But like to date, it's one of the only Earths that has 6 numbers.
Digit.
Usually they'll do 2, 3, or 4 digits because there's plenty of numbers to go off of from that. But yeah,
so the idea that the MCU would be another 616 was that just a red herring? Is that just not a thing anymore?
That's what bugged. So well, that's this is where I appreciate DC and how they do their Earth numberings, because each Earth has their own perspective, and from their perspectives, they renumber everything. And so like there's I forget which DC animated movie it is, but like they're like, oh, so you guys are Earth 3, huh? Oh, to us you guys are Earth 8. That's kind of cool. And like just that different perspective. But then in the comics, in Marvel comics, it's just this omniversal numbering system that everyone just agrees on. Everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm from Earth 616, and across the board we all know that's the main comic universe. Oh, I'm from Earth 1610, everyone knows that's from the Ultimate Universe. And so like it's just this weird omniversal understanding. And so when the MCU came in, and it's just like, yeah, we consider you guys Earth 616. And they've said it twice now. One was a made-up story from Quentin Beck, and then another one was from Christine in Earth 838. And they're both just like, yeah, you guys are 616. It can be looked at as a fun Easter egg from like a fan's perspective. But at the same time, if you are trying to put this into one giant Spider-Verse, like what Spider-Verse is doing, what Miles Morales is doing, then you can't do things like that.
Right.
They like I don't know. It's a strict non-strict rule. Just
Okay, so there we have a
unwritten.
conflict between what people in the MCU are saying and people in the Sony, but which is fine again because it might
Right.
be like which I like your saying of that. Like, yeah, like not everyone's gonna be using the same numbering system, so like
Yeah.
who the heck knows. So let's talk about. Well, actually, I want to go more on the animation of what you said because I am really blown away with how much they use the animation to tell the stories,
Oh.
and not as you said, it's the whole artistic style. Like, like let me give you an example. I'm wondering if this is from the comic books. It's subtle, so it takes a little while to notice, so that it really becomes apparent in the scene with her father. But
Mhm.
with Gwen, the color scheme keeps changing based on the emotional character, and
Mhm.
it looks like her hair changes color until you realize that it's like different light is being cast on her, and so like everything is like dark purples and blues when she's super sad, and then when she hugs her father and he says like he quit the
Ah.
force for her, um, it becomes all sort of super light and pastel-y and amazing. Is that something from the Spider Gwen? Well, actually, I don't know if this term Spider Gwen is appropriate, but is that from the
It's the name
Gwen
of
as
her
Spider
title.
Woman?
It's fine.
Okay.
It was originally the name of her title, even though in
Okay.
universe she's Spider Woman. Um, excuse me. She has since changed her name to Ghost Spider.
Okay.
So the latest title she was in was called Ghost Spider. Whatever. But yeah,
Yeah.
Earth 65 is much more artsy, artistic
Uh huh.
in how they portray um the background. Like
Yeah.
Gwen herself is always like all of the characters are always very much their
Mm-hmm.
style. They don't get pasteled over or anything like that in the
Right.
comic. Um but like they use lights a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And like, like I just think of in Earth 65, the universe that Gwen is from, Matt Murdock is the head of the hand,
Yeah.
and there's all kinds of scenes where he's on a rooftop and there's like a giant neon red light shining down on the
Oh,
situation.
interesting.
So he's just like pasted in red, but like as far as showing emotion and all that kind of stuff, it doesn't usually take over the character like
Right.
that.
And
Um,
and there at least
but
it
it
does
looks
seem like
good.
they're saying there's something in the environment to justify the lighting,
Right,
whereas with
right, right.
Gwen and her
Whereas this is
father,
just portraying the scene, and it's
exactly.
gorgeous, and it really kind of separates her universe from Miles, because like when the two of them are standing together, they kind of
Mm-hmm.
look similar as far as animation style is concerned. And
Right.
so when you go to Earth 65 in Gwen's universe and having that emotional pastel that goes over everything,
Mm-hmm.
it really differentiates between 65 and 1610, where the
Yeah.
established Miles is from, which is the ultimate universe. But yeah, so that's slightly new but similar.
Mm-hmm.
Similar but the different.
Yeah. And so let's talk about Gwen herself because I'm gonna go through some of the characters and worlds that we encounter here. The first one is very much a Miles Morales movie, and this one is still, Miles Morales is, I think, probably the biggest character, but I'd be curious in terms of actual screen time because certainly, like at this point, it feels like Gwen and Miles are almost co-protagonists, at least, and
Mhm.
certainly, you get what 10-minute, 15-minute cold open that is just her and her world. How did you feel about sort of how her story was played out and kind of the way they focused on her so much?
It was a little surprising, but it was
Mm-hmm.
um I did kind of like it because it took like the right amount of time, I think.
Yeah.
If they glossed over it like they did in the like introduction like
Mm-hmm.
cuts that they did into, it'd be more of the same, and then it would also I think it would jump into the story too quick because like
Yeah.
the way they have it like this, it's kind of just like a flashback montage, but set up for being able to walk into this movie without having seen Into the Spider-Verse. So you
Yeah.
get an idea of the storytelling that they're going to do, and
Right.
you get into that mindset with a origin story flashback. It kind
Mm-hmm.
of reminds me of like Up. How
Yeah.
the first like 10 minutes is all backstory to get you involved with
Oh.
this character and with Carl, and
Mm-hmm.
it kind of cements your wanting to root for Carl. And so
Yeah.
here you want to root for Gwen, and then that plays into how um the feeling of betrayal that Gwen and Miles have when Gwen's like, I didn't know how to tell you, and you're just like,
Yeah.
no, and
They
just so many things.
they did it so well because I think like there were a couple of times, and primarily between those two, but also a good deal between Miles and his mother, where
Mm,
I was watching two people have a conflict, and I might have had my own personal opinion on which one was right, but also knowing where both of them were coming from, I was super sympathetic to both of them. And like I
yeah.
was like, oh, Miles, it so hurts. But I mean, even before that, that big reveal maybe has crossed the line, but just where a lot of like she's trying to protect him, she doesn't want to bring him to this universe, all this stuff. Like I know exactly where she's coming from too. I know how afraid she is about going back home, where her dad wants to arrest her, and like the way they set that up so that I was sympathetic for both of them was just so powerfully done.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I also really liked that. And here, hey, look, we're getting to kind of like one of the ethical things we like talking about, but really all of this is ethical in its own weird way. Mostly just because like this movie should win every Oscar. That's the ethical combination. Um, without hitting you over the head with it, just because it was like we're going everywhere. This movie felt it was like, look, we are going to take the diversity representation idea and run with it so hard.
Mm.
And like, so we got some of Gwen's backstory. We've not had many women characters in comic books for sure, especially not in Marvel connected stuff. We went to Spider-Man India world, which I want to talk about for a while because that was just incredible and a whole other thing. It's barely been represented. And then there were just the little things like having. I got to see a spider character in a wheelchair,
Sun
and I had
Spider.
no idea what was that person's name.
Sun Spider.
Sun
She just
Spider.
got introduced a couple last year.
I had no idea how hard that something like that would hit me, and it hit me so hard. And it just, and then there were little things like Miles had a Black Lives Matter button that he was wearing.
Mm.
Gwen had it was kind of blink and you miss it, but there was a lot of like uh, pink, white, blue colors in her stuff, and she had a Trans Lives Matter flag, which is going to hold people running off in different questions directions. I just thought the way that they were like, we're not going to hit you over the head with it. We're not going to do like a stop the movie so we can make a point, but we're really going to broaden the representation in a way that, I mean, Miles Morales was always about that, obviously, like the Black Spider-Man, the Puerto Rican Spider-Man. How'd you feel about you getting to see like so many different ideas of, who Spider-Man can be breaking out of it's all just white guys?
Honestly, really excited because
Mm-hmm.
it's representation is everywhere in comics, but
Right.
it so rarely jumps from the page onto the big screen.
Mm-hmm.
And even in video games, it doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
Like you started Miles Morales,
Mm-hmm. I wonder if
so
you're going to the thing I was going to point out, but you go ahead.
well, there's the character who's deaf, and they signed. Miles knows ASL, and so they
Right.
signed together. And she shows up as like a side character here and there, but then also like in the terrible Marvel's Avengers game. Story is amazing. It's just the execution was terrible. But there are characters in wheelchairs that you can like walk around and talk to in the opening like training mission,
Uh-huh.
and like that shouldn't be such a novel thing to see
Yeah.
because I see it all the time in the comics, but the fact that there's like these one or two offs in video games is a step in the right direction. And then
Yeah.
you have the Spider-Verse where it's so easy to just have any unrepresented community and give them a
Yeah.
spider power and throw them into like the fact that Spider-Man India, Spider-Punk, Sun Spider, even like the T-Rex Spider-Man and Peter Parked Car, who's the Spider Buggy, like just like it steps into a little bit of audacity, but at the same time, like just showing again this message of anyone can be a hero,
Yeah.
and like to have them take the time to dedicate a speaking line and a like an actual cameo spotlight appearance in these movies is such a big deal, and it's so
Yeah.
great to finally see that. It doesn't have to be a statement like, hey, we made the main character black, or just like all these things. It doesn't have to be these one-off changes that will
Yeah.
anger some people because my character is supposed to be white, but like in the Spider-Verse, everyone is everything. Just let it be.
There's a couple things I want to say. That first, just in terms of the video game, what I thought you were going to say, what I want to point out is that, and it's a small thing, but it's very significant. And really, like listening to a lot of Latino fans of the Latina fans of the first movie really helped me see this. That most of the time when Spanish occurs on screen, any foreign language appears on screen, we see subtitles of the translation. And in the Spider-Verse movies, Rio, his mom, and even when he speaks Spanish back to her, it's never translated.
Yeah.
Because it's much more of a, like, we're not making this to say, like, look, this is made for non-Spanish. It's like, no, this is just the universe. If you know what they're saying, great. If you don't. And then I started playing Miles Morales, and I realized they were translating the Spanish. And it's a small thing, but it's one more way in which the movie was pushing a little further forward. The second thing that occurred to me as you were saying that was how, like, when you think about representation, a lot of the time things will go to is people will be like, oh, well, if that's true, if you want like any kind of like superhero, why can't the superhero just be a car or be a dinosaur?
Right.
And the fact that they did that, but not in a way that made it seem like, okay, well, see, this is showing that like Spider India and Spider Nueva York is just a big joke. It was like, no, it works to be a dinosaur, it works to be a car, it works to be a Lego, and that's all funny. But then when you go to India, like Mumbai, I think is the Mumbai Manhattan.
Yeah.
Which also to me feels very much like the same naming conventions of San Francisco. So
right.
I hope there's a big Hero 6 reference somewhere in all of this. But I was just so amazed by how they did that with so much like awareness, that like they made it funny, but then like all the stuff about India really felt to me like, and I've searched for that in TikTok this morning and saw people being like, yeah, this feels like, what Ms. Marvel felt like for our other South Asian, friends. Like this really feels like amazing representation in everything from just the character, the look, to like the jokes about chai and like, oh, here's the museum where the British stole all of our stuff. Like,
oh my god, that drop! I was just like, yo, no way.
They
God,
were
that
not
was so good.
Even the thing about like, oh wait, Peter B. Parker, like you come to our India land to come, find enlightenment. Don't you? I think the line was, there was so much laughter, it was hard to hear, but I think the line was, don't you dare live, eat, live, pray, love us.
Yeah.
Going further on that though, and I'm curious if you saw this the same way, because again, maybe it's just referencing comic things I didn't understand. But I know that when you get those things, and we're seeing this even right now with all of the Ariel, the incredible black actress playing Ariel in the new live-action Little Mermaid, but also like when Miles Morales came out, going all the way back to when Donald Glover was first suggested as, like, do you know the whole story about Donald Glover and Miles Morales?
Oh, that he wanted to play.
He wanted to play Spider-Man, and a whole bunch of people were like, no, you can't do that. And a writer who was like following this was like, why can't there be a black Spider-Man? And so he started writing Miles Morales. So having Donald Glover in this is so good to begin with. But also, like, so you've got all these comments that are always about like, no, you can't do that. It breaks canon. You're changing canon.
Mm-hmm.
And so to have the whole plot be
the
Miles basically being told, you are wrong, that you being a Spider-Man is breaking canon. And that's the thing. I was like, once again, this should feel like I liked the new Ghostbusters movie quite a lot, and I liked that they kind of leaned into the critique that people had about women Ghostbusters, but it felt like it was really like lampshaded, hitting you over the head with it. Here it felt
Right,
much more
making a
subtle,
statement. Yeah.
but still, it maybe this was just me, but I wonder if you have the same. I walked away from this being like, they very intentionally said that the whole concept of like representation or a black Spider-Man or all this is like, you shouldn't have it. It breaks canon. And they very intentionally were like, okay, then, well, actually, we're going to make canon the literal enemy in this.
Damn, no, I didn't. So I didn't have that perspective. As far as like a commentary on canon. For me, it's it it felt like they're diving into the untold like reality of Spider-Man, and the fact that like by being Spider-Man, well, in reference to like Peter Parker in the main universe, by being Spider-Man, Peter Parker always loses. And
Mm-hmm.
the idea that being a spider means losing more than you want to.
Right.
And when you have a new hero like Miles, who's only been doing it for about a year and a half now, he hasn't had, well, he had his quote unquote Uncle Ben moment with
Mm-hmm.
Uncle Aaron dying. But he hasn't had the same amount of loss
Yeah.
and character growth, for lack of a more sensitive phrase, as the other spiders. And it becomes an opportunity to look at the strength of character of each Spider-Man by how they deal with the hardships that they've been given. And that has always been a like staple of looking at of the strength of character that Peter Parker has,
Mm-hmm.
in how he has taken his loss and still done the right thing. So, and then you get this, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, brand new spider of just like, dude, I can save everyone. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I'm really scared of what he's gonna have to learn in
Yeah.
Beyond the Spider-Verse.
When, especially I realized they did it a second time because also bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, this is so easy was Spider-Man India. Because
Right.
he hadn't had his
Yeah.
Uncle Ben, his Gwen's father character die yet.
Mhm.
And I'm very curious where they're going to go with the next one because, yeah, I mean, I to me, the next one will really answer if I'm right about the whole idea being that canon is the enemy here. Because you're right. It may well be that, like, that the point is that, no, you have to have some kind of a loss. But to me, like, I remember conversations we've had with Paul, where one of the reasons why Paul was kind of getting a little sick of a lot of the MCU movies was that there was always this kind of cynicism of, like, you can't save both. You have to, you're going to lose someone. You have to walk away from the girl, whatever it is. And so I kind of love it if we did break that about what if you don't have to have even more tragedy in your life? What if you can have a healthy romantic relationship and still be a spider person? Like, but you're right. It's set up in a way that I like. Miguel is clearly not a good character. Like, there's villain vibes there.
If you want to really dive into it, Peter B. Parker's whole plot line of him being like, listen, I thought I was screwed, and by meeting you, I was inspired to try, and now I have Mayday Parker, and I've patched things up with Mary Jane. She supports me. She understands what being a spider is, and so maybe Miles is that catalyst to the rest of the spiders, and he becomes the new, Miguel of leading the rest of the spiders, of just like,
oh, that could be so good.
You can actually win.
Yeah.
That would be very interesting, and I would love to see that. Absolutely.
That would be great. I did love Mayday so much. Like,
she was adorable.
There's so much you did in this movie that I just don't think would be possible in live action.
Exactly.
So.
I just had that conversation of just like, we don't need. There's a part of me that doesn't want live action Spider-Man movies. Like,
yeah, no, I think so. I think that's fair. I think I like the like. I wouldn't mind if they did a bit of the Roger Rabbit with some, like, Donald Glover gets to be in this in some way.
Mm-hmm.
But continue it with, but it's like the Roger Rabbit side where we're all in Toonville,
Yeah.
And like I think now that they've shown they have that technology, I'm guessing we'll spend at least a little time in a live action universe.
That would be wild. I'm very down for that.
It'd be fun to see. And yeah, and I certainly wouldn't mind if in some MCU project of some kind, a little bit of this popped up. I don't want it to be like a full. Like I don't want to have to go back into the MCU to finish the Spider-Verse. I kind of love. I think right now the Spider-Verse is the best Marvel thing out there, and I'm kind of glad it's not like I still am enjoying a lot of the MCU. I thought Guardians was fantastic. I started Quantumania and after 40 minutes turned it off because I was so bored. So like I'm honestly mixed, and many people are much more fans of it, and if so, that's awesome. But
I saw your status on it. You were not happy with it.
didn't get it.
I didn't want to set you up for failure, but it's not a mind-blowing movie at all.
But this, like, I mean, I still have my visual acuity problems. I still don't know if I could actually get through it, but this makes me want to read a comic book because
that's exciting.
Like just
that makes me so happy.
Like the blue exclamation points going across the screen as he's like screaming and
yeah.
So let's focus on that because you're the expert and I love having you on for this. Talk to me about what parts of this are from actual comic books.
Oh man!
First of all, because on some hand, like if you have a movie called Into the Spider-Verse and then you do a comic book, that to me, and then things from that comic book appear on screen. That feels a little like, okay, we're already in the interconnected universe. And I want to get to those things. But what are things from what was in the comics before this Spider-Verse, Into the Spider-Verse stuff started that we're seeing on screen here?
Okay. So this is tough because the characters that show up in this book called Edge of Spider-Verse, this book came out last year. And so were they working with the studio to show some new spiders who are going to show up in Across the Spider-Verse? I don't know. So I can't just flat out say that like Peter Parked Car, Sun Spider, Spider T-Rex, and the others that were introduced in Edge of Spider-Verse came out before Across Spider-Verse.
Right.
They were publicated first, but who knows? Anyway, so Penny
but they were
Parker
certainly published after the first movie.
Yes.
Okay.
So here's one. So Spider-Verse first published in 2014, way before Into the Spider-Verse.
Okay.
So which I'm actually going to read on my Twitch tonight, but that's people are going to miss it. Anyway, so Penny Parker in the comics, she has this like Neon Genesis Evangelion looking spider. And it was very different from what we got in Into the Spider-Verse. And then in Across the Spider-Verse, in her cameo, she has that same like lanky upgraded version of it's SP//DR.
Oh, nice. Okay.
It's just Sputter.
Right.
But so
it's
she's
Mecha Spider.
So yeah, it's Mecha Spider. And so she has the comic book design now, which was fun to see. The numbering of all the Earths, those are accurate to the comics.
Okay.
Now, not necessarily obviously, but like these are definitely different stories of these Earths.
Right.
Like the death of Chris Pine's Peter Parker in Miles's Earth is very different. And the age is very different. And then Earth 65 is Gwen. Earth, I think it's 50101 is Pavatir Prabhakar's Spider-Man India. Those are the same.
Spider-Man India, that existed before.
Yes,
this.
he was introduced back in the 2014 Spider-Verse.
And now was that like just published in India, or is that just part of the English language? Like
no, main story.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay.
Introduced in American comics. So Spider-Man India was a mini series standalone alternate universe Spider-Man that they did, just kind of randomly, and then when they did Spider-Verse, they brought him in. Same
Okay,
as like
nice.
there's like Marvel 1602, which is Marvel Universe reimagined in the early 1600s. Nick Fury is like the head of security for the Queen. Um,
Oh, so is that what Renaissance era, like Leonardo da
yeah.
Vinci Vulture, was from?
So that one, I think he was from this steampunk version of Marvel where Lady Spider is
Uh huh.
the spider of that universe, and Vulture and Electro has a giant like battery pack on his back. And
Interesting.
that universe is super like steam powered, your
Uh huh.
typical steampunk idea,
Right.
gears everywhere and all that kind of stuff. But that was so much fun to see. And then you also see Lady Spider in one of the like pans of their main like hub area.
Okay.
She's walking around talking to one of the spiders.
Okay.
um Spectacular Spider-Man, the animated guy,
Uh huh.
um he's from the TV show, not necessarily the comics, but
Right.
um I also just have to throw out there, as we're talking about original things that happened, Tom Holland's Uncle Ben moment is
Yes.
there. And like his actual Uncle Ben. But
Mm-hmm.
it's Tom Holland from the back, but it's like skinny, lanky boy, and there's three that you clearly see Tobey Maguire, and you clearly see Andrew Garfield, and there's a third live action one on the right side,
Yep.
um, on the web connected to the Spectacular Spider-Man Uncle Ben moment, and you're just like, ah, because that's the first
And,
time we've seen that.
and did you see that in his room, in his dorm room at Brooklyn Visions, which I
He's
will
playing
say,
Spider-Man.
he's playing the Spider-Man game. I will
And then
say one of
and then he shows up. And then he shows up. Insomniac Spider-Man is also on. Okay. Oh, so one difference is Earth 000 is
mm-hmm.
called Loom World, and that's where the web of life and destiny was created, and that is connected to all the rest of the Earths.
Okay.
That's typically where the spiders use their base of operations. This is not the same.
Okay. This is new.
This because this was running out of Miguel's Earth.
Right.
Um,
Where's Nueva York?
yeah, Nueva York in 2099, Marvel 2099. And so that was slightly different. One cool thing is in the when Miles and Gwen go to meet Miguel for the first time, in the background, there's like a white and red suit being like
Mm-hmm.
made in the middle of being designed. That is Miguel O'Hara's second spider suit that he has for like two storylines, and then he decides he doesn't want it anymore, and so he goes back to the blue. But like that's just a
Nice.
little like fun little homage to
So he's also
comics.
a character in a lot of these things.
Oh yeah, dude, Miguel
Okay.
O'Hara's everywhere. Spider Punk Hobie
Uh huh.
Brown was
Yep.
introduced in 2014, in a world that's just like fight the machine kind of a thing, and he's like the leader of the resistance, and like they took his personality from the comics and just ramped it up to 20 um, in
And
the
what was
movie.
up with his artistic style? Because I don't know the right terms, and I might be wrong, but I think these are the right terms. It felt like he was 2D animation with everything else being 3D animation, and his
It kind
color
of felt
scheme
like
kept
that.
changing. Is
Yeah.
that kind of true to his anime, his the way they're drawn in the comics?
Um, Not really. So in the comics, especially in the first version of the comics, the first like Spider-Verse, there's not like the artistic style of that universe. They don't
Mm-hmm.
really do that. And with the exception of like this Earth is barren and so it's going to be run down, or this Earth is radioactive and so everything is dead. But like it's all the same artist doing everything. So they don't have these like extreme visuals like all that. And Spider Punk just got his own title. Let me see. I have it. Obviously, I guess. Here it is. So Spider-Punk, Battle of the Band, and yeah, his art style is sort of like that, but nowhere near extreme.
I appreciate that you're showing this up for us on radio, but yeah,
only
I can
I'm
now
showing
see it.
you, sir. We're on camera together.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But yeah, so his universe has a style now, but when he was cameoing in other Spider-Verse titles, they do not do that. Like Spider-Man Noir is personally black and white, but that's because he's wearing a black trench coat and like a leather, black leather vest and stuff. But he's not astounded by color and the existence of it.
But that's I have no problem. I have no problem with him taking that and just running with it.
Oh like yeah. It's so cool.
One of my favorite lines from the first movie is Peter Porker asking someone like, "Do animals talk in this universe? Is that going to be
right?" Yeah, so much fun.
Another the comic question. I kind of brought this up earlier, but I'm curious if this is actually a thing. So Spider-Man India exists in Mumbatan, which, as I said, it's a comic. It's like it's an alternate universe in which there's this city that's kind of a combination of Mumbai and Manhattan.
Yeah.
Big Hero 6 occurs in something similar, San Francisco, a combination of San Francisco and Tokyo. Is there any connection between those two stories in comics in terms of them both being part of the same like alternate universe series, or is that just like a convention that they go to every now and then, and the two aren't related except that they're both in comics?
That's just kind of their thing. I don't know what Earth Big Hero 6 takes place in, because it is a Marvel property, as you're alluding to. But it is, I strongly do not believe that they are the same Earth as Earth 50101.
Right.
I could look it up.
No, I'm not. I don't think they're the same Earth. I just wonder if there was like a particular run of comics where they imagined a lot of Earth cities being totally different.
Oh, so I mean, tips usually because basically because for some reason 98% of the heroes in Marvel are from New York, and so if you're going to tell an alternate universe, you're going to base it in something New York-esque. Right. And so that's
or San Francisco as the Big Hero 6 is, but yeah, no, I mean,
but then looks like that's new because Big Hero 6 in the Marvel comics is actually just it's in 616. So there isn't a San Francisco.
Interesting.
So there you go.
That's cool. What are other things about the movie you wanted to bring up?
Oh man. I'm really curious. One of the to go from the comics to jump into where I'm about to say about the movie. In the comics, Ghost Spider, Spider-Gwen, Spider-Woman, she's the only hero in that universe. Like her universe, Earth 65, doesn't have superheroes. And I'm curious if Earth 42, this Earth without a spider, I'm curious if that's an Earth that doesn't have heroes. Because Into the Spider-Verse and across the universe and across the Spider-Verse, we've only seen it from the perspective of spiders and their rogues gallery. There has yet to be a cameo of a non-Spider-Man character, which I don't expect there to be, honestly. But I'm curious.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm curious if a world without Spider-Man is going to be considered a world without heroes.
That alone might be a good reason why there's not. Well, actually, hold on. Back up a second, because I was going to say that for the most part, you're right, and that might be a good reason why to keep all of these things out of the MCU type things. But they did mention Doctor Strange. So Doctor Strange. So yeah, maybe there's this idea that 616, because certainly all the Spider people seem to act like, yeah, there's no Captain America, there's no Avengers, there's no X-Men. It's just Spider people as the only superheroes out there.
MCU seems to be the only Spider who has an Avengers and Doctor Strange so far.
Right. Yeah.
Because Toby and Andrew are like, What are the Avengers?
Yeah, no, exactly. So yeah, I wonder if that's the idea, is that 616 is the completely weird world. Now again, this breaks what WandaVision established, or Doctor Strange in the Multiverse established, but again, it's because we're two different studios and this is fine.
Right,
But yeah,
exactly.
certainly all of these spiders seem to come from a perspective of this is the only kind of superhero that's out there. So that'd be an interesting like world bending.
Talking about size and perspective. So I got a little like meh, but also kind of excited when they showed the multiverse, right? The light blue strand root branch representation of the multiverse that we have seen in like Loki and
Right.
all these other things. And so he's just like, this is reality or whatever. And then he goes, and this is the web of life and destiny. And it's like 85 times that size. And it goes around all of the multiverse. And you're just like, oh, yeah, spiders are cool.
So let me ask you this, and this maybe can be our last kind of big question, but here's the ethical question. If we take for granted what Miguel certainly seems to understand, and thus Gwen certainly seems to understand while she's still working with him. Oh, actually, no, let me back up a second. Okay, so I've got a big ethical question, but first one more comic book question, because we've talked about Hobie, we've talked about Miguel, we've talked about India Spider-Man. What about Motorcycle Spider-Woman? Is she a thing?
Oh, no.
I forget her name. Okay.
So, yeah, Jessica Drew. So,
Jessica Drew, thank you.
Her costume design and her being pregnant are both pulled from a Spider-Woman solo title from a few years ago in 616.
Okay.
And 616 Jessica Drew is a white woman, brunette.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And she actually gets a donor for her pregnancy. And so there's like 2 volumes, about 10 issues where she is pregnant and trying to do what she can to not get involved in superhero fights, but always gets pulled into superhero fights. But changing her into a black woman, an African American woman riding a motorcycle, that's new and that's totally fine.
Yeah, no, it was awesome. I totally loved it. I loved her character.
But then also giving her the organic webbing from her fingertips. That has been done. Silk has that in 616. Okay. Silk is the second person to be bitten by the same spider that bit Peter Parker. It's a whole comic books. Anyway, but she's the only other spider I've seen in recent memory that shoots the webs from her fingertips, as opposed to like wrist.
Yep. I will say the one other thing that I really want to see at some point in these movies, and I wonder if it's happened in the books yet, because again, as you said, they're pushing the representation so hard, is some kind of conversation where, Miles is meeting people and is like, oh yeah, this is a Spider-Man, this is a Spider-Woman, this is a Spider-Woman, this is a Spider-Man, and there's one person who's like, I'm just a spider person. Like, give us that little non-binary spider representation,
That would be really cool. No, we haven't had that yet. We've had Spiders Man, who is thousands of spiders in hive consciousness, but we have not had Spider Person. Yeah.
All right. So here, let's an ethical podcast. Let's hit us with a real ethical question.
Sure.
Is Miguel right? If Miles going back will cause the entire breakdown of his world and possibly of all of reality, is Miguel wrong to just physically stop him?
If, then no. But I do not believe he's right. I don't believe that his assumption is correct. Not necessarily right from an ethical perspective, but I don't think that because he's upset that Miles took the place of Chris Pine, Peter Parker. Right. Because he became a Spider-Man, and so the world corrected itself in having only one spider per universe. So but Octavia and what is his first name? Jonathan Owen, who turns into Spot. They pulled a spider from a different universe and brought it over here, which removed the canon event for Earth 42, but created a new canon event for 1610.
Right.
What I don't understand, and what Miguel should be thinking about, is that Earth 42 still exists a year and a half later. Why is Earth 42 still around if it lost its spider cannon event? As we've already established, that immediately after they saved Peter Pavatier's uncle, the giant hole, the universal hole, dimensional hole started showing up and started falling apart. Earth 42 is still around. So we have an Earth without a spider that lost its spider, its canon event, unless 42 was always supposed to give its spider to 1610.
Right.
Why is that universe still around? So, and along those lines, I don't understand why Miguel hanging out in the universe where that universe's Miguel passed away. I don't understand why that universe had to fall apart if he broke his own canon, but he didn't die. So those are some of the questions that I have going into the next one. But if Miguel's perspective is correct, then I believe that he is acting correctly. Yeah. But I do not think that his perspective is right.
And here's the thing: I just wish one of the characters had pointed that out in some way, because, and here's where I know I'm going to go against what always happens in Marvel movies, because among other things, this is I think Nick Fury at the end of Avengers is wrong. Often what will happen is someone will say, from all of the evidence, you cannot do both of these things, and so we have to understand that letting one person die or the small group die in order to save this much larger group, in this dire circumstance, is the right choice. And again, that can become utilitarianism, and that can become, we're going to actively kill this group to save this much larger group. You got to be super careful of it. I'm not saying it's always oppressive, but I'm open to the idea that is sometimes the thing. And what always comes up not always, but what often comes up in these movies is our hero saying, I know you think I can't do it, and I'll be honest, I don't have any idea how I'm going to do it, but I have hope that I can do it, and so you should trust me. And your trust in my hope should allow you to put at risk this humongous number of people. Yeah. And if you have very little, I haven't watched Avengers in a long time, and so, but I'm just using that as a general example. If you have no evidence to believe that anything except nuking New York will prevent the destruction of the entire world, as horrible as it is, I think I lean towards nuking New York. As a New Yorker who loves that city more than anything in the world. Like Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, if I lived in New York City all my life, of course I would write that everything happens in New York, because, as I said, in keeping the faith, I think anyone who isn't living in New York is to some extent kidding. But, and here even more so, and again, maybe that's what they're showing us, is that like I appreciated that they never full on made Miguel villainous. They didn't make him like mwahaha evil. I think what they were showing is kind of like with him and Gwen. From Miguel's perspective, if we were in Miguel's shoes, we probably make the choice he does. If we're in Miles' shoes, we probably make the choice he does. And to me, that's really good storytelling, is that they're kind of in that ethical, like, yeah, we're not saying what I think the audience is supposed to probably sympathize with Miles, and we're rooting for Miles, but it's not so far we don't obviously know that Miguel is wrong. So actually, maybe, as I said, that maybe it's better that we don't have it pointed out. I think I just talked myself out of my original opinion there.
No, but I mean, just like putting yourself in Gwen's shoes in Moonbatten, of just like, hey, Gwen, by the way, a canon event's about to happen. And she's like, okay, like, I accept this impending loss of a fellow Spider's family member. This is the way.
Yeah.
And her trying to stop Miles. It's just like, if she knows it's going to happen, like, you'd think as a hero, you're going to try to stop that.
Right.
And so, canon events are interesting.
I certainly got the sense that she didn't have the full picture of it until towards the end, because or else it probably would have occurred to her that her cop father was also slated for death.
I got the impression she accepted that.
Okay.
Like that was part of bringing her in, of just like all Captain family members,
Mm-hmm.
especially all Captain Stacy's, are going to die. Earth 65, Captain Stacy is still alive in the comics.
Mm.
He's still around.
Interesting. Interesting.
But yeah, I mean it's kind of one of those, is I think fatalist Gwen Stacy has accepted that that's going
Yeah,
to be
that's
her
fair.
reality. And I think part of it is because she looks up to Jessica Drew so much, and
Uh-huh.
Jessica told her that it has to be like this.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, my last question for you, and this is going to tie into a big thing you do in another part of your life that you can tell people about, but we'll start with a question. As someone who has a Twitch stream specifically about Legos, how did you feel about going to Lego Spider-Verse?
That was so cool. That was so unexpected. And I mean, so much of this movie is unexpected, but that was so much fun. And the
Yeah.
fact that he's already in the team, and he's got his little watch, and my one like, oh man, was that they didn't use the Daily Bugle Lego set. That would have been a
Oh,
perfect
nice.
like placement, but I think it's because two things. One, the Lego set was probably too small for what they wanted to do, like as far as
Mm-hmm.
like footprint. But then also, I don't think the Daily Bugle Lego set has a bathroom for Pete to go and hide in and reach out to Miguel.
Oh,
So,
yeah, that would make sense. That would make sense.
but I bet they probably had that conversation. There's no way that a that these story writers who think about as much as they have did not
Yeah.
consider the Daily Bugle Lego set. But that was so much fun. I love that they did that, and that they kept Spot's original animation. And they do that across the entire freaking movie.
Yeah.
But like, even just something as 40 seconds in a Lego stop motion
Mm-hmm.
universe, they still had animated Spot being just like, this isn't right. I'll be okay, I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Yeah.
Just so
I
much
mean,
fun.
it was, yeah, and just like, I mean, we didn't even talk about like the Black Girl Avatar. We didn't talk about like the
Oh,
AI they
Spider Bite.
have.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good. It's all so
Oh,
good.
there's also, what we didn't get is we didn't get Spider Man, who is Aunt May with the spider powers.
Oh my god. Okay. See, this is why I'm so mad that the movie's not out online yet, because I want to go watch it like 10 more times and slow it down. And like right now, people are doing stuff of the trailers, but I really can't wait for like TikTok once it's online and people are just
Mhm.
doing like frame by frame YouTubes and TikToks and all that. Well, speaking of Legos, Will, it's been awesome having you on. If people want to hear more about you, talk to them about where they can hear you talk about Legos, and even more importantly, where they can hear you talk about Marvel Comics.
Absolutely. So, twitch.tv/Silver Dreamer, silver with a Y. During the week, I build Lego and building block sets. Actually, this coming week, I'll be building a giant building block Bumblebee. He's like a foot and a half
Cool.
tall. It's going to be super
Nice.
fun.
An actual Bumblebee or the Transformer Bumblebee?
Transformers Bumblebee.
Okay.
Yeah, in his robot form. He does not transform.
Because a
I also
Lego foot and a half tall bumblebee insect would be terrifying, and I would love it.
It would absolutely be terrifying. There are some that are a few inches big, but I haven't
Uh-huh.
bought one yet.
Oh.
And then on Sundays, I also read Marvel Comics. It's against TOS, but I'm too small to be caught. So, so I do read Marvel Comics on stream, and I try to choose the comic that has the most to do with something going on in the
Nice.
movies or whatever. So we just recently did Secret Invasion. Up next, we're doing Spider-Verse. I don't know what we're going to do next. But that's been a lot of fun. So follow me on Twitch there. My other big thing is that I have a podcast called Hype is My Superpower. Me and my buddy Steve, we both read way too many comics, and we talk about it.
Yeah.
I stream the recording on Twitch as well. So if you find me there, you will see us go live on Sunday afternoons. And we're going to be talking about AXE Judgment Day, which is something that we are reaching out to you and Paul for
Yes.
having a guest on our pod, and that's going to be super fun.
Yeah, I've been a guest on their pod a bunch. I listen to their pod a bunch. I think if you love comic books, it's really good. But also for me, as someone who doesn't, like I said, it's just hard for my brain to wrap myself around that media. I have such a good experience listening to your podcast. You explain the comics and then talk about them in ways that, even though I haven't read it, I feel like I can totally follow along. So check
Thank
out
you.
both of those things. We'll have linked to both of those in the show notes. And of course, this is an Ethical Panda podcast. You can find this podcast and Star Wars Universe podcast, my other one, both of them at theethicalpanda.com. You can also find them wherever you can find podcasts. Most importantly, though, we want to know what you think. Send us your feedback. What do you think of this movie? Do you love it? If some reason you didn't like it, we'd love to hear that too. Though you got to make a good case, because I'm going to be kind of surprised. But everyone gets to have their tastes. Let us know what you think. We'd love to hear from you. Would love to hear all the feedback. So all of that is on theethicalpanda.com, and it's also all in the show notes. So I'm about myself, Will. Thank you all so much. It's been a crazy week, so there's not going to be any Patreon content, which I apologize for, but we'll get back to that soon. Thank you all so much, and have a great day.
Bye.